March 19, 1982, 8:47 a.m. Leesburg, Florida. The tour bus was parked at a property owned by Jerry Calhoun, the bus driver's friend. It was a sprawling estate with a small private airfield, a mansion, and acres of open land. Most of the crew and band members were still sleeping after the previous night's concert in Knoxville, Tennessee. The Diary of a Madman tour was exhausting. Night after night of performances, endless travel, hotel rooms that all looked the same. Inside the bus, Ozzy Osbourne was passed out in his bunk, sleeping off another night of heavy drinking. Sharon Osbourne was in a hotel room nearby, handling business calls. The crew was scattered throughout the bus, some sleeping, some starting to wake up. On the property, a small single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza F-35 sat on a private runway, and 25-year-old Randy Rhoads, the most talented guitarist of his generation, was about to make a decision that would end his life and haunt Ozzy Osbourne for the next 4 decades. But to understand the magnitude of this loss, to grasp why Randy's death would devastate Ozzy in ways nothing else ever had, we need to go back 2 years. We need to understand who Randy Rhoads was, what he meant to Ozzy, and why their partnership was so much more than just a working relationship. December 1979, Los Angeles. Ozzy had just been fired from Black Sabbath. His life was in shambles. Addiction controlled him. His future seemed non-existent. Sharon Arden had just taken over as his manager, and she had one mission: find a guitarist who could help launch Ozzy's solo career. She auditioned dozens of guitarists. Some were technically proficient but lacked creativity. Others had flash but no substance. Then she heard about a young guitar teacher at Musonia School of Music in North Hollywood named Randy Rhoads. Randy was 23 years old. He'd been playing guitar since he was 6, taught by his mother Delores, who ran the music school. He wasn't just a rock guitarist, he was classically trained, studying music theory and composition at UCLA. He could read music, he understood Baroque chord progressions, he could play Bach as easily as he could play Black Sabbath. But he was also a rock and roll virtuoso. His previous band, Quiet Riot, had a following in Los Angeles, but they'd never broken through nationally. Randy was teaching guitar to make ends meet, unsure if music would ever be more than a side career. Sharon convinced Randy to audition for Ozzy. The meeting took place at a small rehearsal space. Randy showed up nervous, clutching his guitar case. Meeting Ozzy Osbourne, one of his idols from Black Sabbath, was surreal. They plugged in. Randy started playing, and within 30 seconds, everyone in the room knew something magical was happening. Randy's playing was unlike anything Ozzy had heard. It combined classical technique with rock power. His fingers moved across the fretboard with surgical precision, but the sound was pure emotion. He could be delicate and brutal in the same measure. He played like he was channeling something beyond himself. Ozzy started singing over Randy's playing. Their voices, Ozzy's distinctively nasal, dramatic vocals and Randy's soaring, singing guitar lines, fit together perfectly. The chemistry was instant and undeniable. "You've got the job," Ozzy said after less than 5 minutes. "When can you start?" Randy was hesitant. He had responsibilities, students to teach, his mother's school to help run. But Sharon made him an offer he couldn't refuse. This was his chance to stop being a guitar teacher and become a guitar legend. Randy accepted. And from that moment, he and Ozzy formed a bond that transcended typical bandmate relationships. During the recording of Blizzard of Oz, Randy's genius became evident. The opening riff of Crazy Train, now one of the most recognizable guitar riffs in rock history, was Randy's creation. The haunting keyboard and guitar intro to Mr. Crowley showcased his classical training. Every solo, every fill, every melodic line bore Randy's distinctive fingerprint. But what made Randy special wasn't just his technical ability, it was his work ethic and his genuine humility. While other rock stars partied after shows, Randy would go back to his hotel room and practice for hours. He carried classical guitar books on tour, studying constantly, always trying to improve. He didn't drink heavily, he didn't do hard drugs, he was polite, professional, and utterly dedicated to his craft. In a world of excess and ego, Randy was an anomaly, a serious musician who treated his instrument with reverence. Ozzy, despite his own demons and addictions, recognized Randy's specialness. Randy made him want to be better. When Randy was around, Ozzy tried to drink less, tried to focus more on the music. Randy believed in Ozzy's talent when Ozzy didn't believe in himself. Their relationship was part professional partnership, part older brother, younger brother dynamic, part mutual admiration society. Ozzy saw in Randy the discipline he lacked. Randy saw in Ozzy the raw charisma and star power that could make his music reach millions. Sharon saw it too. She knew Randy was the key to Ozzy's solo success. She made sure Randy was well paid, well treated, and given creative freedom. She protected him from the chaos that surrounded Ozzy. Blizzard of Oz was released in 1980 and became a massive hit. Crazy Train dominated rock radio. MTV played the videos constantly. Critics who had written Ozzy off were forced to acknowledge that his solo work equaled or exceeded his Black Sabbath material, and everyone recognized that Randy Rhoads was a major reason why. Guitar magazines started featuring Randy on their covers. Other guitarists studied his solos. Eddie Van Halen, already established as one of rock's premier guitarists, called Randy one of the greats. Coming from Van Halen, that was the highest praise. In 1981,
Diary of a Madman cemented Randy's status. His guitar work on the title track was epic, a 7-minute journey through madness that showcased every aspect of his ability. Flying High Again featured one of his most melodic solos. Over the Mountain demonstrated his power and precision. Randy Rhoads, at 24 years old, was being hailed as the next guitar god. His future seemed limitless, but Randy was restless. He loved performing, loved creating music with Ozzy, but he missed serious study. He wanted to return to UCLA, to complete his music degree, to study classical composition formally. He talked about eventually becoming a classical guitarist, maybe even a teacher like his mother. Ozzy and Sharon begged him to stay. Just one more album, they said. One more tour. Randy was irreplaceable. Without him, Ozzy's solo career might collapse. Randy agreed to one more tour, the Diary of a Madman tour of 1982. After that, he told them he was taking time off to go back to school. Ozzy was devastated by the idea of losing Randy, but he understood. He loved Randy like a brother. If Randy needed to pursue his education, Ozzy would support him. They never got the chance to make that decision. March 19, 1982, the morning after the Knoxville show, the tour bus was parked at Jerry Calhoun's property in Leesburg, Florida. The band and crew needed a rest day before the next show in Orlando. Andrew Aycock, the tour bus driver, happened to have a pilot's license. When he saw the small plane on Calhoun's property, he got excited. He asked Calhoun if he could take it up for a quick flight. Calhoun was hesitant. The plane belonged to him, and he didn't know Aycock well, but Aycock was insistent. He said he was an experienced pilot. Just a quick flight, nothing crazy. Calhoun reluctantly agreed. Aycock then asked if anyone from the tour wanted to go up with him. Most of the crew was sleeping or had no interest, but Rachel Youngblood, the band's seamstress and makeup artist, said yes. She was 58 years old, a kind woman who everyone on the tour loved. She'd never been in a small plane before and thought it would be fun. Randy Rhoads was awake, sitting outside the bus with his guitar. He loved flying. He'd taken a few flying lessons himself and had talked about getting his pilot's license someday. When he heard Aycock was going up, he was interested. "Can I come?" Randy asked. "Sure," Aycock said, "we've got room." Randy put down his guitar and climbed into the small plane. Rachel followed. Aycock got into the pilot's seat. The plane took off at approximately 8:40 a.m. It was a clear, beautiful Florida morning. Perfect flying weather. Back on the bus, Ozzy was still sleeping. So were most of the crew. A few people were awake, making coffee, talking quietly. Nobody was paying much attention to the plane. Aycock flew the Beechcraft around the area for a few minutes. Everything seemed normal. Then he decided to do something incredibly stupid and dangerous. He decided to buzz the tour bus. Buzzing is when a pilot flies extremely low over a target, sometimes just feet above it. It's dangerous, often illegal, and requires precise control. Pilots who buzz are usually showing off, trying to impress people on the ground. Aycock lined up the plane and dove toward the tour bus. Inside the bus, people heard the engine noise getting louder. Some looked out the windows and saw the plane coming in low, too low. Rudy Sarzo, the bass player, was standing outside and dove to the ground as the plane roared overhead, missing the bus by mere feet. The downdraft from the plane's wings rocked the bus violently. People inside screamed. Some thought the plane was going to crash into them, but Aycock pulled up at the last second. The plane climbed, banked, and circled around. On the ground, people were yelling at the plane. "What the hell is he doing?" someone shouted. This wasn't funny. This was dangerous. Rudy Sarzo, standing outside, felt sick to his stomach. He knew Randy was on that plane, and he knew this was about to go very wrong. Aycock lined up for a second pass. The plane came in even lower this time. Aycock was either trying to get closer, or had misjudged the first pass and was attempting to improve. Either way, he was flying recklessly, showing off, playing with lives. The Beechcraft screamed toward the tour bus again, flying impossibly low, the engine roaring. And then, disaster. The plane's left wing clipped the bus. Just a small contact, the wingtip caught the bus's roof. But at that speed, even a small impact is catastrophic. The plane immediately lost control. The wing that hit the bus crumpled. The plane spun violently to the left, corkscrewing through the air. Aycock had no chance to recover. The physics were against him. The Beechcraft spiraled out of control, spinning like a top, the engine screaming. It traveled about 200 yards before slamming into the garage of Calhoun's mansion. The impact was devastating. The plane essentially disintegrated. The fuel tanks ruptured instantly. Fire erupted. The explosion woke everyone on the tour bus who'd been sleeping. Ozzy jerked awake, confused and disoriented. The bus was shaking. People were screaming. What was happening? Outside, chaos. Black smoke was pouring into the sky. Flames were visible from the crash site. People were running, some toward the fire, others away from it. Rudy Sarzo was already running toward the wreckage. He'd seen the crash. He knew Randy was on that plane. Maybe, somehow, someone had survived. Maybe he could help. But when he got close to the flames, he stopped. The heat was too intense. The fire was too big. Nobody could have survived that impact. Nobody. Don Airy, the keyboard player, came running up behind Rudy. Together they stood there, helpless, watching the mansion's garage burn with the wreckage of the plane inside. Randy was on that plane, Rudy said, his voice breaking. Randy was on that plane. On the tour bus, someone finally told Ozzy what had happened. A plane crashed. It was the small plane from the property. People might be dead. Ozzy stumbled off the bus, still drunk from the night before, trying to process what he was being told. He saw the smoke. He saw people crying. He saw the flames. Who was on the plane, he demanded. Who was on it? Nobody wanted to tell him. Finally, someone said it. Randy. Randy was on the plane. And Rachel. Ozzy's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees right there in the grass. A sound came out of him that witnesses would later describe as inhuman, a wail of pure anguish, a primal scream of grief and disbelief. No, he kept saying over and over. No, 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 no. Sharon arrived shortly after, having been called from her hotel. When she saw Ozzy on the ground, saw the smoke, understood what had happened, she too broke down. Randy wasn't just their guitarist, he was family. Emergency services arrived, fire trucks, ambulances, police. But there was nothing they could do. The fire had to burn itself out before investigators could even approach the wreckage. When they finally could examine the crash site hours later, they confirmed what everyone already knew. Andrew Aycock, Rachel Youngblood, and Randy Rhoads had died on impact. The force of the crash had been so severe that the bodies were nearly impossible to identify visually. Dental records would be needed. Randy Rhoads was 25 years old. He'd been alive 45 minutes earlier, sitting outside the bus with his guitar. Now he was gone. The investigation that followed determined the cause quickly. Pilot error. Andrew Aycock had been flying recklessly, buzzing the tour bus, and had misjudged the second pass. His showboating had killed himself, Rachel, and Randy. Making it worse, investigators discovered that Aycock had cocaine in his system and had been awake for most of the previous night. He was impaired and exhausted when he decided to fly. He never should have been in that cockpit. The tour was immediately canceled. The remaining dates were scrapped. There was no way to continue. The heart of the band was gone. Ozzy was inconsolable. In the days after the crash, he barely spoke. He drank constantly, trying to numb the pain. Sharon was terrified he would kill himself, either intentionally or through alcohol poisoning. "I can't do this without Randy," Ozzy told her. "I can't make music without him. He was the reason any of this worked." The guilt consumed him. If Randy hadn't joined his band, hadn't agreed to tour, hadn't been on that bus in Florida, he'd still be alive. He'd be teaching guitar in Los Angeles, safe and sound. Ozzy had taken Randy away from that life and gotten him killed. That's what Ozzy believed. That's what tormented him. The funeral was held in California. Ozzy attended, devastated. Delores Rhoads, Randy's mother, was there. A woman who'd lost her brilliant son, her pride and joy, the guitarist she'd taught since he was 6 years old. Ozzy approached her, barely able to stand, tears streaming down his face. He tried to apologize, tried to tell her how sorry he was, tried to explain that he'd loved Randy like a brother. Delores Rhoads, in the midst of her own unimaginable grief, did something extraordinary. She hugged Ozzy. She told him it wasn't his fault. She told him Randy had loved playing with him, had been happy on that tour. Randy died doing what he loved. She said, "Don't blame yourself." But Ozzy did blame himself. He would blame himself for the rest of his life. The music world mourned Randy's death. Guitar magazines ran memorial issues. Musicians from across genres paid tribute. Eddie Van Halen called it one of the greatest losses in rock history. Even Randy's rivals acknowledged that a once-in-a-generation talent had been lost. The cruel irony was that Randy had just been on the verge of even greater recognition. His work was being studied by guitarists everywhere. He was influencing a new generation. His fusion of classical technique and rock power was opening new possibilities for the instrument. And it was all gone. Just like that, because a bus driver decided to show off. For weeks after the crash, Ozzy couldn't imagine continuing. Music felt meaningless without Randy. The thought of hiring another guitarist felt like a betrayal. But Sharon, showing the strength that had already saved Ozzy's career once, pushed him to continue. "Randy would want you to keep going," she insisted. "He believed in you. Honor his memory by continuing." It took months, but eventually Ozzy agreed to try. They auditioned guitarists, looking for someone who could fill the impossible void Randy had left. They eventually chose J.K. Lee, a talented player who understood he could never replace Randy but could help carry the music forward. The first concert after Randy's death was agony for Ozzy. Playing those songs Randy had created, solos Randy had written. Without Randy, there felt wrong. Ozzy cried during the show. The audience gave him a standing ovation just for showing up, but he kept going. Concert after concert, album after album. Through the rest of the 1980s, through the 1990s, Ozzy's career continued, became legendary, made him one of the most famous rock stars in history. But he never forgot Randy, never stopped missing him, never fully healed from that loss. In every interview for the next 40 years, when asked about Randy, Ozzy's demeanor would change. His voice would soften. Sometimes he'd cry.
The grief even decades later remained fresh. "Randy was the best thing that ever happened to my solo career," Ozzy said in a 2002 interview. "He was more than just a guitarist. He was my friend. He made me better. And not a day goes by that I don't think about him." Sharon, in her own interviews, was equally emotional about Randy's death. "It devastated Ozzy in ways that nothing else ever has," she said. "He's dealt with a lot of loss in his life, but Randy's death broke something in him that never fully healed." Ozzy maintained a relationship with Delores Rhoads over the years. He'd call her on Randy's birthday. He'd visit when he was in Los Angeles. He'd talk to her about Randy, sharing memories, keeping Randy's spirit alive. Delores, for her part, never blamed Ozzy. She understood that Randy had made his own choice to get on that plane. She knew Ozzy had loved her son. In 2011, Delores passed away at age 95. Ozzy attended her funeral, closing a circle of grief that had begun nearly 30 years earlier. Randy's influence on music never diminished. Guitar students still study his solos. Crazy Train remains one of the most covered rock songs. Music schools teach his techniques. The Randy Rhoads Scholarship Fund, established after his death, has helped countless young musicians. In 2021, Ozzy released a documentary about Randy, titled Randy Rhoads: Reflections of a Guitar Icon. Ozzy was 72 years old, dealing with Parkinson's disease and other health issues. But when talking about Randy, the emotion was as raw as it had been in 19... He was just getting started, Ozzy said in the documentary, tears in his eyes. He was 25 years old. He had so much more to give. "It's not fair. It's not fucking fair." In interviews promoting the documentary, Ozzy admitted something he'd rarely said before. Randy's death had contributed to his later substance abuse problems. He tried to numb the pain, to drink away the guilt, to forget the loss. It hadn't worked. It never works. "I drank to forget Randy," Ozzy confessed. "But you can't forget someone like that. And you shouldn't. He deserves to be remembered." The crash site in Leesburg, Florida, became a place of pilgrimage for Randy's fans. For years, people would leave flowers, guitar picks, notes. The mansion where the plane crashed changed hands several times, but the garage that Randy died in became a quiet memorial. In 2002, on the 20th anniversary of Randy's death, Ozzy held a private memorial service. Close friends, former band members, and Delores Rhoads gathered. Ozzy played a recording of Randy's guitar work and broke down crying halfway through. "I'm sorry," he said to the assembled group. "I still can't believe he's gone." Nobody in that room judged him. They all understood. Some losses you never fully accept. Guitar historians often wonder what Randy would have achieved if he'd lived. Would he have stayed with Ozzy? Would he have returned to school and become a classical guitarist? Would he have formed his own band? The world will never know. Randy Rhoads' story ended at 25. His potential unfulfilled. His genius cut short by a stupid, preventable accident. But his impact on music was permanent. His influence spread through generations of guitarists. His solos are still played, still studied, still revered. And Ozzy Osbourne, now in his mid-70s, still talks about Randy in present tense sometimes. "Randy is the best guitarist I ever worked with." Not was. Is. Because in Ozzy's mind, Randy never really died. The music keeps him alive. In his 2010 autobiography, Ozzy wrote about Randy extensively. One passage stands out. "People ask me about my biggest regrets. They expect me to say the drugs, or the drinking, or the bat. But my biggest regret is that I couldn't save Randy. I know that's not rational. I know I wasn't responsible. But I still feel like I failed him. He trusted me, joined my band, and I couldn't protect him. That will haunt me until the day I die." March 19th remains a difficult day for Ozzy every year. The anniversary of Randy's death. Sharon knows to give him space on that day. He'll usually spend it alone, listening to Randy's guitar work, remembering his friend. The tragedy of Randy Rhoads' death is that it was so pointless. He didn't die from the excesses of rock and roll. He didn't overdose or crash a car while high. He didn't succumb to the lifestyle that killed so many of his peers. He died because a bus driver wanted to show off. Because someone made a reckless decision with other people's lives. Because fate is cruel and random and unfair. Randy Rhoads should have lived to be 60, 70, 80 years old. He should have had a long career. Should have taught countless students. Should have composed classical pieces. Should have pushed the boundaries of guitar even further. Instead, he got 25 years. And Ozzy Osbourne got a lifetime of grief. But here's what Ozzy has come to understand over the decades. Randy's brief time on Earth mattered. His music touched millions. His influence shaped rock guitar for generations. His kindness and professionalism set an example in a world of excess. Randy Rhoads lived more in 25 years than most people live in 80. And while Ozzy will never fully recover from losing him, will never stop missing him, will never completely heal from that wound, he's learned to honor Randy's memory by continuing, by making music, by surviving, because that's what Randy would have wanted. For Ozzy to keep going, to keep creating, to keep living. "I carry Randy with me every day," Ozzy said in a recent interview. "He's in every song I sing. He's in every show I play. He's part of me now. And when I die, whenever that is, I'll finally get to see him again. I'll finally get to tell him thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for the music. Thank you for being my friend." March 19th, the day the music died for Ozzy Osbourne. The day he lost not just his guitarist but his brother, his inspiration, his friend. The loss he never recovered from. The loss he carries still. Randy Rhoads, forever 25, forever missed, forever a legend.